Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome very, very much, and welcome to Conversations. This is an unusual program. I think we're good if we get a two-shot. There we go. We've got three guests on this program. Rather a special arrangement because we're going to be talking in some detail about the concept and the existence in the world or American society of bullying. And we're going to be talking about that in some detail. I'd like to introduce the guests and get into a conversation. I'm going to go around from left to right here. And right across from me is Dennis Horvitz. And he's a talk show host, an atheist talk show host. And he's very interested in the issues involved from an ethical perspective. Dennis, thanks for coming in and talking.
Thank you.
It's so good to welcome you to the set.
I was on your show a couple of years ago.
That's right. We talked about all matters that were of great interest, and it was a really good program. Yeah, thank you for coming in then and coming in now. My pleasure. On the day that Mubarak is announcing he's going to step down. Right. May have relevance, not. But
well, I'd like to think that I'm playing a part in that.
All right, very good. And across the catty corner from me is a fellow Detroit, I just find out, resident or person from Detroit, and that's John Thompson, who has, unfortunately, in his early life, suffered abuse, so he would be an abuse survivor is the title we have for you. And welcome, John, very much to the program. Immediate left is a dear friend of mine, personal friend, Fred Brass, and he is billed on the program as an abuse survivor activist. And I think it's fair to say, or proper to say, Fred, I guess unrelated, has more recently suffered a stroke, and he does have sometimes a little difficulty with words, so people who are tuning in might want to bear that in mind, because, but what he has to say is very well worth the wait, and don't be too worried if he has a little stammer or something here and there. Fred, welcome so much to Conversation.
Thank you, Harold.
Why don't you kick it off? You and I have been in touch for quite a while, Fred, over this issue, and it became clearer and clearer to me that it was not only an issue that affected you personally and others, and is something that ought to be addressed in society, but is an issue that has larger implications in terms of the organization of world society, the issue of bullying and people who have to submit to a condition of bullying, because unlike the Hollywood movies where the person who's being bullied comes and fights and wins his manhood and is, you know, that kind of a story, John Wayne, is not true when there's overwhelming power directed at you. And for a great number of the people of the world, I think it's probably fair to say they are bullied by people who are in power. So it has more universal implications. But I wonder if maybe you could share with me your own interest in this issue and maybe outline a little bit of your own circumstance for the audience, please.
Thank you, Harold. Well, when I was a child, I was about 8 years old, and I was initiated to bullying. I was bullied at school, and they would throw me down the steps. I had my clavicle, my shoulder, was smashed. I was in the hospital until the doctors, it happened so many times that the doctors couldn't put it back together any longer, and they had to remove it. And it didn't stop. That continued. And I was basically crucified. I was tied to trees and whipped with rope and baling wire and twine. It was in Pennsylvania, and there was a farm implement store nearby. And this was in a patch of trees where this happened. So there was lots of items around. And they put live snakes in my clothes, rats, and while I was tied with my arms and legs very much like this, like an X, And later on, after that happened, and my mom called the police. The police came. They found the people that did this. Everything was supposed to take them to court, and suddenly the priest got involved, and nothing was done. They said, offer it up for the souls in purgatory. Nothing more was done about it that time and every time afterwards. This continued for years. And then I came to, the priest actually abused me because he said he was trying to give me a hug and comfort me for the trouble I was experiencing. And it wasn't. He wasn't. He was trying to get my clothes off. Mm-mm. So I got away from him and went running out, and I went home and told my mother, and she told me it was a mistake. That doesn't happen. A priest can't do that. God would deal with him. He would be thrown in the ocean with an anchor around his neck. I know in the Bible it says a millstone, but Catholics aren't known for reading the Bible because you don't read the Bible. You read a catechist, Reader's Digest version of the Bible. And after that, I was waterboarded. I was held down on the ground, and they used a garden hose to shoot water up my nose and down my throat. And the police came for that, and it was and again the charges were dropped. And that happened 3 times. And after that happening, by this time I was in school at, it was in 1972. And I went into the 7th grade, and I was walking down the hall of the school, and all of a sudden the kids in the classroom started shooting at me. Shooting at me. So
a gun?
They used BB guns, air pellets. They were razor blades that they used to kill squirrels and rabbits, and zip guns.
That's incredible. You know, this is incredible. There's so many questions going on in my mind, but I wonder. Thank you for that. And I wonder, John, maybe you could talk a little bit about numerous questions.
I also want to.
Okay, finish up. No,
I also wanted to get in that they use zip guns there, but when the police rounded them up, they told the police that they wanted to use 22 rifles, but they couldn't break down the 22 rifle to fit it into a gym bag to bring it into school. And they said the next time they're going to get me with a 22 rifle.
That is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling. I got a million questions, psychology, just one. But John, why don't you share a little of your own? You're coming from Detroit, like as was I think. So maybe we could share a little bit of your own early background, and we sort of set the tone, and then we can get into some questions of what the heck does it all mean.
Interesting, touching on something Fred said. I came from a family in which there was all kinds of abuse on both sides, my mother's side and my father's side. Particularly my father's side. It was very, very horrific, truly horrific. And in fact, an uncle that I lived with, who was a horrible man, he actually killed his own father, and the whole family covered it up. But touching on something that Fred said, I too, my parents were so violent and often psychotic, which was extremely frightening. And this began when they had 4 children, and it began when, you know, when I was born. But at one point, I actually went to the nuns. This was when I was in the 1st grade, because I thought my mother was going to end up killing one of us. And I actually went to the nuns for help, and I told them what was going on. And again, the attitude was, these are wonderful Catholic parents. Catholics don't do this. This is impossible. You must be lying. What a horrible child you are. Burning in hell forever is too good for you. And they went and got a priest because they needed someone else to witness this horrible child, and they needed a priestly authority to tell me, you know, what a monster I was for making up these horrible lies about my wonderful parents who were sending me to Catholic school.
And again, a Catholic school.
Catholic
situation,
school,
yeah.
yes.
It must have been, I can't imagine what it must be like, such a towering figure, the parents being of an abusive nature toward the totally dependent infant, even in the cradle it could be.
Yes.
And those things have psychological dimensions that are staggering in the importance, and it's more widespread than the general society realizes.
Yes. I can tell you about the block I lived on sometimes.
What do you make of it all, Dennis?
Well, let me just say that, you know, I'm fortunate in that I have never suffered that kind of abuse, and I'm here primarily as a supporter. I am also a supporter of an organization called SNAP, which stands for the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, and I have my own cable show, as you know, on New York City Atheists live on tape. New York City Atheists also support SNAP. But I have been, over the last couple of years now, I've been kind of, as a supporter, have been following incidents of this kind of thing, and I think one of the reasons is that the general public is unaware of it, and that these people can operate with such impunity, is because the people who do this know that nobody is going to come forward. The stories seem so fantastic, and they can operate with impunity because they know that you're not going to be believed, and they can. And up until fortunately, only up until recently, but I think, and I think that's why shows like this are very necessary to get the word out. People don't understand. The general public don't understand how this kind of thing can happen. And one thing that you touched upon, of course, is the idea that the priest or the rabbi or whatever the clergy person is considered a representative of God. And it's just, people just zone out. It doesn't compute that somebody could do this kind of thing. And there's also in the process, I think, of certain, with sexual predators, they're quite canny. They'll pick on a child who is vulnerable, and they'll zone in on that one child. So part of the denial in the general public, as in, you know, certainly in your situation, and I think in Fred's situation, is that most people have experiences with priests and nuns or other clergymen,
authority figures.
Yeah, authority figures, but nothing happens. They have absolutely no reason to make any connection to it, and that's part of this whole process, is that they will find a vulnerable child, or usually it's not just one child. It's usually within, you know, and the child needs affection. Maybe there's a divorce. The father has died. The mother has died. Some kind of absentee situation, or there's just general turmoil. Both, like in your case, both parents were there, and that's how they do. They focus in on this, and they do it with impunity because they know that these children are not going to be believed.
Also, the parents particularly, that just really struck me. The parents are such overwhelming, let's say the newborn infant, it's so overwhelmingly powerful.
A child is entirely dependent.
In every sense of the word, particularly, it would seem to me, the mother. It's so overwhelmingly, and if there's psychological problems there, it can be passed on very easily. One thing I'd like to mention, your stories, I'm like with Dennis, I had the best mother in the history of the universe, and none of this ever had anything to do. never had a fist fight in my life to fight back. Some of the things people would say is, well, if you're being bullied by somebody, all the movies tell you, you just fight back and win, and then you get your, you know, all that kind of, and it doesn't work when the overwhelming power is aligned against you that you really have no defense against. Particularly if you're older and you've got 20 people, unlike the Hollywood movies where the person knocks everybody down or something, you cannot fight, you must submit. In a certain sense, it's a terrible state of consciousness. But I would also like to say, beyond the extremists of the stories you both told, is the fact that in a general sense, authoritarianism is part of the way in which the society, all societies, are held together, and virtually all institutions are authoritarian in their basic structure. And the power relationships within, we've got this thing going on in Egypt now, people want something called freedom. And you got a power relationship going on. It's political. It's endemic to the society. So in a certain sense, we've always had a power group that would run things. Serfs on a feudal estate were like cattle.
Yes,
and
yes.
slavery we've had. One group would win out of another. And people would be enslaved and so forth. So we've never had real justice or real, you know, a real society where there could be freedom from power, overwhelming power, intimidating, abusing the citizens. That's much less extremist than you have. Yours are extreme examples, but it's there in general in the organization of the society.
Yes, like,
but go ahead, talk.
Howard, the thing is, when they use state power to back them up, like with me, after they said after the police found out that they were going to use a .22 rifle the next time, he tried to get this through into the courts, and the school district and the borough. 'Cause I grew up in Pennsylvania. This happened in Montoursville, Pennsylvania, and the Montoursville school district and the Montoursville borough denied that. They just, no, you're not going to do this. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, in that certainly in the case, one of the problems with the cases of clergy sexual abuse, of course, is that the clergy is generally discouraged from going to the authorities, even when someone in authority wants to. They're basically sat on. But in your case, when you went to the secular authorities, you didn't get anything from them either.
No, nothing.
You were betrayed twice, really.
Yeah, and they made a deal to protect their reputation, to protect the tax base of Montoursville was the most important thing. So they said, you go home, we'll tutor you. And a few months later, they complained about the cost of having a teacher come and teach me at home.
I mean, they want you so you'd be protected from the bullying you'd receive in school if you were to go. They were going to protect you from that by letting you be schooled at home.
They were going to protect their own interests. They weren't interested in protecting me.
They wanted you out of the way.
They wanted me out.
That's right.
That's right.
Okay, that's interesting. It's sort of like a scapegoat notion of scapegoat.
And then instead of going to the 8th grade, I went to a hospital. They put me in Divine Providence Hospital. I was not ill. I was put in Divine Providence Hospital in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and kept there. And I did not see a doctor or anyone. The priest laughed about it and said, "You have the best hotel room in town. You got the state's going paying for you to have a 4-star hotel."
Yeah.
And they kept me there, and I went bowling. I went to the movies, to the library, with nurses. They took me out to, and
they tried to make you a lotus eater, basically.
Yeah, basically.
What's a lotus eater?
Well, it's you know, in the Iliad, the story of Odysseus is you know they were distracted by this amongst the lotus eaters. Just you know pleasured out. So basically, you're just.
We got a lot of that in modern society. You know?
So they
right.
I said
thank you. I didn't know that.
Just,
Okay. Yeah.
So they kept me there, until the state and the insurance company, where my dad was a truck driver, so the company insurance was paying this as well as the state, complained and wouldn't pay the bill anymore because they were paying for me to be in there for months, and I was not sick. I was not ill at all.
Can I just ask you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's my own talk show host.
I understand.
Yeah. Where was your mother in all of this?
Yeah, and your family. He stressed that he had
just,
problems with the parents. That's the closest
she would just
authority.
say, "It's the priest. You know, God wants this. It's God's will."
Right.
The priests are saying this is God's will. He has to be in the hospital. She just submit to the.
Sure. Right. Okay.
They would tell her, "You're just a woman. You need a man to take care of this. A woman cannot. A woman cannot get involved in this, and
be a man.
Needs a man to take care of, and the priests are going to take care of this."
Yeah.
So.
It's so hard in this day of age because that's so impolitic nowadays, and it's kind of hard to think back to. There was a time when people just submitted, and unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of people who still feel that way.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have to submit to a situation. They have to have in their mind an attitude of submission to authority, because authority is so significant in terms of the arrangement of society. It's all authoritarian. I'm going to do a program with a fellow after this who was in the Marine Corps, and I had to be drafted into the military. And when you're in the military, they didn't want to hear anything except do what you're told. They're going to train you to kill people, which you don't want to do. They have to do it. And they didn't want to hear. I used to try and explain we could do things democratically. And the drill sergeants didn't care. You know, it's all authoritarian. Just do what you're told, and more or less that's the dictate of the society. And one thing that's come up, and all of the institutions are authoritarian. Corporate cubicle, senior vice president tells vice president what to do, and it all goes like that. It's all authoritarian in terms of real liberation. But a lot of it, you mentioned two things. Your parents, particularly, are an authority figure, but you also brought in economics. What creates this in the society? It would probably, in a very real sense, come to be found if we really looked into the discontent being manifest by your parents or by others. Will come around finally, it seems, for a vast majority, to something having to do with economics, and the fact that the economic system is not one that allows for the idea that an individual is able to be able to assert themselves in a way where they won't have all the competition and so forth that's built into the system that's applied.
And maybe that's some way follow the money.
You understand. But maybe you could talk a little bit about your own, particularly your parents. You stressed that there was trouble from both your father and your mother. It must be horrendous in the crib to have authority figures that were not sensitive. And we all need affection terribly as we come into this world. And maybe you could talk about what caused your situation to be different than, let's say, Dennis's or mine, do you think?
Family, my father's family. His father ran away. That was my grandfather. So my grandfather ran away because his father was extremely abusive. He and my grandmother, they had 10 children who survived into adulthood. I lived with my grandmother for a year and a half. I know what kind of a woman she was. Horrible. I heard stories about my grandfather. Horrible. So the 10 children who survived into adulthood, 7 women and 3 men. All 7 women had mental breakdowns. They all also married into some money. The 3 brothers, the youngest was my uncle, who ended up killing his own father when he was 23 and his father was 86.
Good grief, we need Truman Capote to write something.
Horrible man. My father was often psychotic, and this was all due from the extreme violence that went on at home. And my father, in talking a little bit with him, he thought all families were violent.
Yeah, there are families that are violent.
Yeah, and he thought all families hurt each other.
Yeah, and that they argue and fight and have argumentation,
Yes.
and the attitude and the spirit and the vibe, as the kids would say.
And that's a common theme that comes up in cases of incest, too, is that a lot of these children
Yeah.
just grow up believing this is what families did.
Yeah. But what about, why is this, is there, you've been thinking about, why is it that violence has to do, in a certain, James Joyce and that, it has something to do with an identity quest. If everybody or somebody has a thing about met needs, that there are needs, there are emotional, there are overall needs. Who is that fellow that does that? That if people had what they needed in a certain sense, then these manifestations of psychosis or whatever would to a large degree go away.
Yeah.
Is it genetic? Is there something genetic to the idea? Or is it something to do with the societal order or the inappropriateness of the way the society's organized? What causes societally for there to be violence of some human beings against another? And what causes such a sadistic attitude to take advantage of the least among us? I notice our wisdom schools have all said we should pay attention to the most vulnerable, the least among us, and politically we've not done that well over the long sweep of history. It's all been to reify those who are powerful, become powerful, so you then can assert your power on other people, and that's the ideal that so much of our political thinking and our societal. I'm just trying to get at some of the where does it all come from? Yeah,
that the and talk about power. That the power came from when the state and the insurance company asked for documentation to show that I was ill. They just sent me to another hospital. Mm-hmm. And at another hospital, there when I went in there, the priest came to me while I was still at Divine Providence, and they told me, we arranged for you to take a test. You're going to take a test for WAC, Williamsport Area Community College, and you're going to get your high school diploma through them. You're going to finish quick. And then once that is through, we're going to send you to college. This was something that was talked about earlier, because when I was being tutored, the teachers were saying, you got to send him. You want to send him to advanced courses. And I was studying Chinese language and Russian European history.
You had a bent for mathematics?
I did, but my mother would always say a little prayer for a math or grammar test, and so you won't feel so bad when you fail.
She was setting you up for that.
Kind of,
that's a psychological attitude. Where does that attitude come from?
It's all religion. It's all religion.
Okay, he is on the ethical atheist side and that sort of thing, and religion. It's all religion. Well, I would say a great deal of it has to do with economics or inappropriate economics.
You know, when you were talking about it before, just a few minutes ago, we were talking about is it psychological, is it genetic, is it economical? I think it's kind of an interplay of all three, really. Mm-hmm. At least,
and maybe some other factors.
And maybe, not
it's very
limited to those three. But you know, because because with Fred's story, they wanted, shove him under the rug. They want to shove you under the rug because it interfered with the prestige of the town, of the city. The same reason why the Catholic Church has basically shuffled these priests out of the way. And I was just thinking when you were talking a few minutes ago that they have a problem with one school, so they push you off into another. And it's kind of like the obverse in the case of a lot of these cases of priests abusing children. It's the priests that get shoveled. In this case, it was you that got shoved around. Mm-hmm. Try to sweep it under the rug.
I was sent to another hospital, told I was going to take this test, went there. My mom and dad went into another room with a doctor and a priest. They stayed in there for a long time. My grandmother went in, came back out and said to my great-grandmother that this is awful, there's something, they're saying all kinds of things, none of it's true, and the priests are agreeing with this.
You said you've mentioned to me before that your grandmother was kind of was it your grandmother or great grandmother was kind of a very positive figure for you.
My great grandmother was the positive force here.
Right.
She was my great grandparents. Both of them always were a very positive force as far as education and just being there.
They would have been pretty old, wouldn't they?
Yeah, my great grandmother died when I was 30, so she was 100 years old.
Wow, that's long lives. Yeah.
But that's considering that.
Yeah,
it's good that you had it that long because.
And I needed her,
yeah,
especially at that time, because I was set on by several large men came, and they held me all of a sudden because the doctor came in and he said, "Hello, Fred, you're going to be staying with us for a while," while shaking my hand, and he held on to me, and what's going on? And these men came and grabbed me, and they gave me an injection, and then they gave me 5,000 milligrams of Thorazine.
Wow.
3 times a day.
Okay.
Isn't that for manic depressives?
Usually.
Oh, it's depressing.
But it makes you
it's a
lethargic.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's strong.
And you just lie in a stupor most of
So
the
they were
time.
putting the onus on you being psychiatric, a psychiatric problem, and you're just not
just
normal.
Constantly.
That's what they.
I was constantly.
Where's Thomas Zaz?
So that you were the problem.
Yeah, 3 times a day, every day, just 3 times a day. You got this Thorazine.
Right. It keeps you in the middle.
Yeah.
Kind of keeps you right there.
Keeps you very low.
Kept you down.
Yeah.
And there was some other children there. The same thing was happening. There was a girl there from Wilkes-Barre. There was a boy there from Wilkes-Barre. And they were, I guess it's the same thing, because when I talked to her family, her mother said, "We asked a priest for help to fight the bullying, and instead she's here, and we can't fight this. I don't know where to go."
That's the thing that gets to me is people want to have, if I may, people want to think, well, this is, people fight in the schoolyard, and what happens is part of becoming a man. You learn how to fight and take for your, John Wayne and all these kind of things. Particularly, they lay that there. But what happens when you're not? Those myths about how you can just fight back are not able to have any reality at all, but you have no choice. Like slaves. Slaves had no choice that the chains were going to be put around them, that they cast their eyes, all of these kind of things. They don't have a choice in the matter, and the fact that you are not free, or even think about being free, is something that is the lot of so many people. It must be the cause of a great deal of discontent within the psyche of people. That's what I'm getting at. And it's probably more widespread. Lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah, but in a school situation.
But I want to get John a chance to speak and to turn up again. And also, if I could, John, the bringing up of the sexual thing, because that's a particular thing. And for a person of spiritual significance to violate a youth, it just seems to me particularly onerous. That somebody who represents a spiritual tradition, like so much apparently within the Catholic Church, is something. And I wonder, maybe you could bring out a little bit more of your story, if you would, please, and what the situation was. You were abused sexually?
Oh, yes.
And maybe they would bring that up front and forward, because it's very relevant to things in the modern world now. The sexual side of spiritual people abusing youth.
When I was
onerous.
Yes, when I was 6, the first person who sexually abused me was a neighbor girl, and she was about 3 years older than I, 3 or 4 years older. and she knew all about male and female organs. She knew how they fitted together. She knew the sex act. She knew everything about sex.
You were about 6?
I was 6. I was in the first grade.
You were in latency period, Mr.
Yes.
Freud. If you were 12, you would think that would have been manna from heaven. If you were a boy who thought the only reason a girl's there is to say no.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, okay, so it's a little hard to understand that she abused you because most, well, you understand. I didn't mean to interrupt, but...
So it was absolutely terrifying for me. Children are not interested in sex. They don't know anything about sex. I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, the innocence of children is so beautiful.
It's a knowledge you never want to have.
Oh, the knowledge you're talking about.
Yes,
okay.
what she gave me a knowledge I never wanted to have. I was terrified.
Yeah, it's
because of the society I was growing up in. It involved private parts, so you knew it was dirty.
Yeah, yeah.
It was extremely painful. It was absolutely horrible, and I just wanted it to stop. Plus, on top of that, I would go to Catholic school 5 days a week, and right from first grade, the nuns, it was how dirty sex is.
Yeah.
That was religion class. Sex is dirty. Sex is dirty. And
unless it's by one of our...
Yes, and
elders.
and if you have sex outside of marriage, now mind you, they're telling this to 6- and 7-year-olds.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And if you have sex outside of marriage, you're nailing Christ to the cross all over again, and you're a horrible person. And so I was having this done to me, and then I was told I was being this horrible person. And how many 6-year-olds are married? You know, how many 6, you know, so...
I don't understand married. I don't...
Yeah, why are they telling this to 6-year-olds?
Yeah, right. Well,
you know,
it's called indoctrination.
It's called brainwashing.
And how strong
Yeah.
the religious thing, particularly that has the answer for the great big question about death and afterlife, threatening people with the fact that there is a terrible place called hell that you're going to go to if you don't submit to the power of the political leaders who are telling you what to do and maybe abusing your children or doing whatever they want.
And you're in no
because they have
position to
power.
have any kind of
And you
objective
cannot resist
perspective.
in any way. That state of mind is one that we ought to bring out and put out on the table.
Well, I sent out thousands of emails over the New Year holiday about this happening and calling for the UN to take action to stop it because it's happening around the world.
Right, and I know you've been in touch with people all over.
Yes,
the
I've
world.
been in touch
Good
with
for you, and you too.
a lady in Austria,
Elizabeth
Camerlander, and Sylvia Tunley in Australia. And Sylvia has been abused, but Miss Camerlander is like you. She's
a supporter.
She's a supporter. She's interested in helping people, and she has so many stories, so many narratives of men and women who have been abused by the church in Europe, and Sylvia has the same thing in Australia.
Yeah, but I know that some of the things.
Hers is in mostly Austria, but it's throughout Europe.
Yeah,
and it's the same.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. We know
the frame of mind of having to submit to an unjust situation where power is being exerted by one who has the power to exert that power over another, and you have to submit to that, is a condition that's almost universally been part of the human condition and should be. Maybe we're coming to a point where we could have individual liberation coming to people where they would not have to submit institutionally, structurally, politically, economically, the way the society's organized. Maybe something going on in Egypt might begin to be something that could start bringing that into
Let
being.
me just interject
Yes,
about what you said, because children, at least when I was a child, were taught, do what you're told.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when this girl came
military model.
and said, you have to do this and you have to do that, I didn't feel I had the power to say no.
That's exactly the point. You're powerless.
So I did it.
Yeah. So you would know.
And I hated it.
You would have
it
to
teaches
do
you
it
to
again.
hate yourself.
And all the people who should have protected you were part of the problem.
Yes,
and institutional
exactly.
structures and institutional arrangements.
It's very Kafkaesque, you know. It's
Yeah,
like
it is. Well, James Joyce said history is a nightmare of injustice.
Well, you know, but
from which perhaps we're awakening, one would hope, possibly. Is it possible we can ever awaken from the unjust pattern that has been characteristic of civilization since it began?
I don't know. I think there's
Is there any hope for
shows like this
liberation?
are I think shows like this are you know are one indication. I think that the word is getting out.
I think a lot of people are afraid to approach that darkness.
Yes.
And they don't want to know.
Look what's happening in
Yes.
Egypt now. They're having a thing. They're saying, we want freedom. We want some. They don't have a leader. They don't have a thing of their own. They're just, we want some freedom. We want some justice and everything. And they don't. And there's fear that if you don't have those systems in order, we have the same thing economically now. We don't have a solution to the economic problem. And if you don't submit to this, you're going to have chaos and you're going to have power. I mean, you're going to have chaos and you're going to have violence. And that's something that they threaten the people with, the power. But power is all held in every political entity by a small group of people. They own all the assets. They set the template for all the institutions. They set everything. And everybody else are more or less, in real terms, like serfs on an estate that they own.
Yes.
So what you're
So
covering is
slavery is still the,
Yes.
you have to submit. It's a little modulated from shackles and slave ships, but it's still slavery. It's still the order of the day, and you have to submit to it, and it runs against the grain of something human in all of us, I think.
Right. So, but you're covering basically the kind of the macrocosmic.
Yes,
view,
I mean that's what I do.
And they're covering from the other side.
These are the prime examples
Right.
of where that kind of thing people can rationalize or work around it. But you know what I'm saying?
I just, as a supporter, I can't imagine just the hellhole that it must be like to go through what you two did.
I can't imagine in the crib with people who have
happens.
real psychological
Yeah,
problems, delivering down on the poor infant.
Yes,
it burns
it
down.
happens.
It
It
gets
happens.
down.
Yeah,
It must be
yeah.
horrible.
It does happen.
I mean, that's in the extremis.
I just think you two are just amazing for your courage in coming forward. And
Yeah.
I can tell you as a supporter, I guess my role is basically to tell you that at least as far as that shame that comes upon you, that there's no reason, to. I just think it's just to be told by somebody who's not in that situation that you're all right, that there's nothing to be ashamed about. That
No, we should rally around them. The
Yes,
society
yeah.
in general should
And-
wrally
and
around
to encourage other people
The
to be
people who
supportive.
are being bullied.
Yes.
Why would people put up with that?
Well, that's
Right.
because you're just constantly being.
Right.
Why
It's
were
not
you-
like
why were you
It's not like it was one or two.
Yeah, they got
It's
10 people
10.
already. That's right. They got all the movies.
and it's an entire
where the star
environment.
hits
Yeah.
20 people. The star comes in, he can knock down all 20 of them because
Yeah,
he's so
yeah,
super duper. And it's baloney. It hasn't anything to do with. But why you and not me?
That's
Has
that's
this,
a very good question.
The scapegoat. The idea of the scapegoat, which we've had throughout all these ugly societies we've had out of history and so forth, is something that is, there's a person that they put all of the, it's ritualistic or something, and why some and not others?
in talking with a lot of abuse survivors.
Yes, abuse survivors.
Especially sexual abuse survivors.
Okay, important.
There seems to be a consensus because the mind is the brain is a wonderful thing to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so when something horrible is happening to you, you ask that very question: why me? Why is this happening to me?
Now, why are they picking on
you?
Yeah.
And so in talking to survivors, especially when you're very young and you really don't have the vocabulary,
Right.
and there's nobody to go to,
Right.
The conclusion usually is, I must be doing something wrong.
Right. That's what they want you to do.
Right. And turn it into yourself. Turn
Yeah.
your rage in towards yourself.
Is that like masochistic?
It
could
becomes
develop masochistic.
It becomes masochistic.
And whence comes the sadism? Where does the sadism come that anyone would want to take advantage of a vulnerable entity?
That's-
Whether it's an animal Does somebody want to take advantage of a vulnerable animal?
Yes.
We do all the time, incidentally. But where does it come that people want to take advantage of something or a person that is vulnerable rather than go to their corner and comfort them and help them as a fellow human being? Where is the lack in terms of the society?
Possibly one's own feelings of inadequacy and
right.
the need to feel powerful, the need to control something.
Power is a very
you look for a
dangerous thing.
victim so you can feel strong.
Yeah, so
This
you
happened to me.
because everything else is out of control,
around. Yeah, okay.
and you want to feel
And you have
control.
some control.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. You
priest-
want to get some control
Yeah.
because you don't have control.
The
so
priest-
that's right. That happens in concentration camps.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
yeah.
priests and the nuns were there telling us about these horrible people, gay people. At first, I didn't even know what it meant.
Right.
Because you were such a small child. And they were very dangerous and very evil, to look out for them. And they're going to go to hell, but you have to be careful of them while they're here.
That thing about going to hell,
That's
that's
Yeah.
been
always
such a sword of Damocles that they've been able to hold over the consciousness of people
And
throughout all of history. But you're going, you know.
I went and turned to
Really?
them and said, shouldn't we be nice to them?
Yeah,
Because
right.
they're going to such an awful place.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Seems that we should be nice to
Your
them.
problem is you have some humanity in your consciousness and so forth, and these things.
And
like in the
thinking logically,
military.
too. That was your downfall right
Yeah,
there. That was your downfall.
Yeah, right. You're being good.
I was
Or you're
daring to
being
be logical.
I know.
empathetic.
It's
No, but
trips you up every time, doesn't
the
it?
sadistic quality that is built into that, that's really an interesting thing. What creates that? It does, I think, inadequacy of self, and also maybe vulnerability, and a lot of that has to do with economics. I think.
With my family, I know growing up, it's all about destructive behavior instead of constructive behavior. So in my family, there was no nurturing.
Right.
Going back for
Nurturing, empathy, those are beautiful qualities.
for 5 generations. So I, as a child, if I had a need, because my parents' needs were never met.
Unmet needs.
They saw that as a threat. And you're not supposed to have needs because that's what they were taught. So if I had a need, I wasn't supposed to have a need, so I was being a bad child. So I needed to be punished.
You're not meant to have needs. You should be self-reliant, Emerson?
Yes.
Kind of thing?
Not bother anybody, in other words.
That's right.
Yeah. Be a good capitalist.
And if I got a cut, I was a bad child because mother said, don't cut yourself. So if you got a cut, you did that on purpose to annoy me, so you need to be punished.
Yeah.
So no matter what you did.
I don't know how either of you didn't become
was-
homicidal maniac
Yeah,
yourself.
right. No, really true. Yeah, because
I don't know how you kept it
apparently
together.
I had a different, favored company. It was just nothing but love. You know.
Because if I was in school and I got bullied, there was an authority figure I could go to that would protect me. But you didn't have that. I mean, it was the authority figure was part of the problem.
Yeah,
You know,
Yeah, the
enabling
authority
problem.
figure and the authoritarian nature of the institutions that
Right,
they're trying to
right.
train you to be fitting into
Right.
as a compliant. Like again, the military model is a good one. When you're in the military, all you're being taught is to do what you're told. We want you to do what you're told, and if you're a good cubicle senior vice president, you will do what you're told to get the profits up. That's what life's about, and fit in and be, not a free individual person who can make the decisions for yourself, or empathetic understanding of others, or love, or any of these kind of things have nothing to do with the dictates of the organizing of the society that is still in place, out of history, a nightmare of injustice, in my view, and
with
horrible scapegoating examples such as happened in the extremists with you. I'm terribly sorry.
Thank you.
when John and I, we're from different parts of the country, and basically the same thing happened to us.
Yeah.
So this is something happening to children every day, even as we speak. It's
Around the
happening to
world.
children around the world.
It's systemic.
Every everyone I've spoken to, this has happened to children. When I sent out the emails over the holiday, a few days later, I got a call from a lady I knew from the internet. I hadn't spoken with her for close to a year, but she called. Matter of fact, I hadn't spoken to her in several years since I came to New York, and she got my number off the emails, and she called me, and I found out the same thing happened to her.
Yeah.
And she's in Ohio.
Yeah, it's systemic.
We never met.
Things are more. Yeah.
So the whole thing comes back to like the power thing, that it's church and state together.
Well,
they form quite a power.
Collusion.
The collusion.
Yeah,
there's
right.
not a wall. There's not a wall
Right.
between church and state.
Especially
it's more
when-
like George Bush said. There's a bridge.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a thing between business and politics and the organization. And what Lord Acton said, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Nobody is more absolutely corrupted than a child when you have their parent who's going to be abusive in their attitude toward you. That is so horrendous. Or somebody who's vulnerable, being intimidated by somebody who's in a position of special authority, particularly like a priest or something. That seems to me just incredibly onerous. I'm sorry. I can't.
After I told some people what was going on, some student teachers, and she told her father, who worked for Child Welfare of Pennsylvania, and they did an investigation of the place where I was being held, and they closed it for inhabitable conditions. And then I was sent to Catholic school. They put me in. I hadn't been to school from the time I was in 7th grade, and I went back in, and they put me in 11th grade. And I finished school. I finished the 11th and 12th, and they made sure I didn't have a number of classes to go to college. I just got a general diploma, and I studied on my own, and I finally got to where I did go back to college. It took me close to 10 years. So I went back, and I was studying to be an attorney for abused children.
Oh, yes.
And
William Kunstler.
and
yes.
the
Clarence Darrow.
I wanted to be the Clarence Darrow.
Yeah, thank you. For the defense.
For the defense
Of the abused.
and
good occupational aim.
I was in college, and my children were sitting at the table Christmas Eve, 1992, and they told me that some friends of theirs were being abused in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We had visited there, stayed with the children's grandparents, my in-laws, and some other children down the block from their grandparents were being abused, and they told me about this happening. Immediately, I called the parents and talked to them, and we made arrangements to meet after the holiday. And I went back to Harrisburg, and we tried to take this to the police, and we were told the police are too underpaid and their morale is too low. They can't get involved in child abuse cases.
Metaphors abound.
That's when I got involved with a friend of mine was a florist working for abused children, but she was a florist and she met with Hillary Clinton to supply the floral arrangements for the White House. So I hurried up and I wrote the narrative of what was happening to these girls.
That's right, and that's available.
It's yes, I have.
We have a thing at the end. Those viewing, we'll have a link to that blog spot that has that letter that was sent to involved with Miss Hillary.
And I took it down to Washington and got it to the lady there, and she got it to Hillary Clinton, who got it to Janet Reno,
Attorney General.
And Harrisburg police changed their mind by the time I even got back from Washington.
Really had to change their heart, did they? Yeah.
By the time I got to Harrisburg and I called the parents, they were saying they're going to take the case.
Yeah.
Apparently morale picked right up, didn't it?
Yeah, okay, and what that does is that we've only got about a minute left, so we got to round it up. Really interesting. I'm sorry what you've abused, whatever can be done, and maybe we ought to just concentrate a little bit here in these last few minutes. What can be done? Maybe there are people who you can get the ear of that can make a difference. You've got some things you're doing. You're doing things that are covering
if I could just
Snap you mentioned, and then you're doing things. You have a blog. And we put the link to their blogs both up because it not only links to their own personal stories, but to institutional structures that address these, and you are too.
Yeah,
that's all I want to say. Thank you very much for the program. But yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, if you have been abused or if you know of someone who has been abused, you can contact snapnetwork.org or just go Google Snap and find out information. So
SNAP.
SNAP, snapnetwork.org.
Stands for?
SNAP stands for Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests.
That goes into the thing, particularly there's been a lot of that with the
Or
Catholic.
you can contact New York City Atheists.
You can
put a plug in there too.
And then we have the blogs for each of these two gentlemen. And fellow Detroit, thank you very much.
Thank you so
much.
much.
Get together and have coffee and talk about Grand River Avenue in Detroit and so forth. And all of that.
And I never told you, Fred, but I'm actually also from Pennsylvania.
You are?
There
Yes,
you go. There's some
City.
synchronicity going on here
Yes.
and so forth. So thank you very much for that. I'm sorry that is there. I just am interested in the idea of the abuse of power, which is so manifest, and may there begin to be some light shed on this planet that can do away with the causes of both the sadism that creates that kind of thing and liberation of the human spirit to be in tune with the least and empathetically in touch with the whole of the environment and the whole of the human environment and larger context. A liberation, perhaps from the nightmare of history is what might be at hand, and let's hope it would happen in order to do this. Sorry you had to go through that. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you very much.
And all the very best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harold.
My pleasure. Okay, I think, now gentlemen, when it goes to black, you might as well stop talking because if it's not on tape, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
Harold, nice to meet you.